an investor, mentor, and advisor to the next generation of American food companies, former co-CEO of Whole Foods Market, Walter Robb has a long and varied entrepreneurial history, ranging from natural food retailer to farmer to consultant. He joined Whole Foods Market in 1991, and in 2010 was named co-CEO along with John Mackey. In 2017, Robb transitioned his leadership focus on his role as a passionate advocate for greater food access in underserved communities. Serving as chairman of the board for Whole Kids Foundation, Whole Cities Foundation, Robb is also on the board of directors for Union Square Hospitality Group, The Container Store, Food Maven, and Heat Genie. He is an ardent organic advocate. He works in his own organic garden, has served on the board of directors of the Organic Trade Association and the Organic Center for Education and Promotion. In 2013, he received the Culinary Institute of America Augie Award for Sustainability and Food Ethics. And in 2018, he was inducted into the Expo West Natural Products Expo Hall of Legends. Please join me in welcoming Walter Robb, who will explain what better business beyond the bottom line is and what it means to our business today.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Doesn't he look sharp, Kevin? Looks like he's really dressed very well. Pleasure to be with you, and can you all hear me okay? Congratulations to the Better Business Bureau. They've been in business since 1912, a fact I learned, and there's not very many businesses make it to 100 years. It just doesn't really happen. So for you to have been in business that long and to stand for the things that you stand for is pretty amazing. And to all the award winners, I thought you spoke so incredibly well in the video. I was so impressed by the various pieces of work that you're doing in this community. So I take my hat off to you. Congratulations once again for that wonderful group of people. I'm happy to be back in Omaha again. Some of you know we built a store here in Omaha. I remember coming many years ago to try to figure out where to put it, and drove up and down the roads looking. Do we go downtown? Do we go here? Where do we go? Finally, oh, the heck, we'll go in the middle. At the old, remember the Burlington Coat Factory, because it had the exchange. We thought it was pretty good. And, but I have a Warren Buffett story for you, which is that, actually Jeff just gave me these lentils. I'm a lentil, I love lentils. So he went and got some, and they said, you might recognize this brand. Well, this is our brand at Whole Foods. But reminded me of a story when I was at a small lunch with Warren. And I said to Warren, John and I would like to come down and see you in Omaha, and to do that, we'll probably have to buy a lunch or something like that. And, you know, 20,000, whatever you bid for the lunch with Warren. He said, oh, no, Walter, here you go. Here's the number. Here's my assistant. Just call her, make the thing. But then he stopped in the way that people do with glasses. You know, they put it down like that, and they go, well, we'll probably have to order off separate menus. Because he's a Dairy Queen guy. And anyways, it was pretty funny. Yeah. I chose to be here today when I saw this come through, and folks do come ask me to speak. I'm fortunate because of our journey at Whole Foods, but I came, and by the way, I thought that was a lovely prayer to open the day and really setting, you know, to set a tone for today. But when I saw that you were honoring integrity in leaders, it really spoke to me. I want to tell you a story. When I was a student at college, I had a class in my junior year on religious ethics, and we read all these things. And at the end, the final exam, the professor gave us the piece of paper and said, here's the final exam. It was a take-home exam. And he asked this question here. Drawing on all the readings in the class, who are you and what or whom do you find guidance for the conduct of your life? And I was a junior in college, and that was kind of a question that you couldn't really skirt around. There it was, and I had to sort of confront the question of, what are my values? What do I stand for? What do I want to do with my life? It was a real gift of a question from a professor. But it led me to kind of a deep exploration of the values that I hold dear. And one of them is integrity. And it was spoken better than I can by the different leaders who spoke on the video about what integrity means. It means all those things. It means consistent action, it means keeping your word, it means willing to say you're wrong when you're wrong, all those things that were said. But for me, in that particular class and answering that question, it was one that surfaced for me. Hence, when you reached out and said you wanted to do a talk, you were honoring folks for integrity today. It really spoke to me, and that's why I wanted to come. And I appreciate being here for that purpose and to be with all of you. So thank you. The great thing about this question is it's one that you can continue to ask yourself your entire life. Are you living up? What are your values? What do you stand for? And are you living up to those day in and day out, whether it's your personal life or whether it's your business life? So we're going to talk a little bit today about business, but the two certainly overlap. For me at Whole Foods, of course, I felt like I was called to bring to the work of bringing healthier food to the world, and so it never felt like there was much of a separation between my personal life and my business life. They just collapsed together. I was fortunate and lucky to have that experience. It was one of the great honors of my life to help lead that company over close to 30 years. But I did start at a little store called Mountain Market. We were talking earlier about my start in business, but my father, when I left college, I wanted to start a natural food store, and my father said no way, and he wouldn't loan me the money. So my stepfather took his checkbook out and wrote me a check for $10,000 and just gave to me, said, "Here, go do your dream." And I say that story because, when people believe in you, it's got a power that's greater than almost anything. And but in this little store I had started in 1978 with 1,000 square feet, it taught me. It was in a small town that you've never heard of called Weaverville up in the northern part of California. It was a small town of about 5,000 people, but it was a great place to learn a lot of lessons. And there were three stories I would tell you about my experience here that I think perhaps many of you will resonate for many of you having your own businesses. But first was, I knew nothing about business. I had a big heart full of big dreams and knew nothing about business. And so I watched the guy that had the hardware store down the street named Dick Morris. And when I went in to watch Dick, the customer would come into his hardware store on the main street. It was about 3 stores up from mine, and he would say, "And good morning, Kevin, how are you this morning? And how is your family? And how are you doing?" And there would be all this conversation about that first before we got to what sort of piece of hardware do you need. And what I learned from that is that business is about relationship first. It's about putting people first. It's about establishing that trust and relationship before you get to the business. And I'll never forget, that's a lifelong lesson. Dick is still alive. He's in his 80s now. But I will always be so grateful to him for showing me that business begins in that way. And obviously tried to carry that forward into our philosophy at Whole Foods, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The second story was I used to drive I had a little truck. And because I could I could go down to the San Francisco produce terminal, which is a longer drive. I could buy the 9-size cauliflower. For you produce aficionados, that is a big head of cauliflower, not the ones that you see normally maybe at Baker's. Or did I say that? No, I shouldn't have said that. Anyways, competitive advantage, right? Where can you find competitive advantage? I could drive my little truck down to the further produce terminal and buy these. And I got so excited, I used to buy a lot of stuff. I would go at 2 in the morning, drive down, shop at the market, drive all the way back, go back to work and put the cauliflower up. I got so excited I overbought and I got myself overextended on 30-day terms. The way it works on the produce terminal is you go down, you write a ticket, and they put your name. They just called me Mountain since I came from the mountains. It just said Mountain. It's early in the morning and folks aren't much for a lot of speeches and stuff like that. So my guy was Louis Andraghetto, and he had Golden State Produce, and I docked with him. I had a flannel shirt on, so they called me Mountain. And I had to tell him, Louis, I realized one day I wasn't going to be able to pay my bills. I had extended myself. I had bought too much produce. My store was in a small town, and it was bumpy in business. And so I said, Louis, can I talk to you upstairs? And his office was not fancy. It was just a kind of a desk and with chairs. And so he said, so we went up. He said, yes, Mountain. I said, Louis, I got to tell you, I've overextended myself. I cannot pay my bill this month, and I would like to ask you, if you will just trust me, I promise you I'll pay you a little bit each month, and in 6 months I'll pay you off. And I just need this. I need this support during this time. So again, with the thing that like Warren did with the glasses, Louis had the glasses, and those points in the conversation where the people with glasses do, where they drop them and they look at you like that. So he looked at me for about 10 seconds and he said, "Okay, Mountain, I'll do it." And what I learned from that experience, and I paid him off in 6 months, just like I said I would, integrity. And then after that, my word was my bond on the produce street in the morning. I could do anything. I could write a ticket anywhere. People said, Louis had told them this guy is good for his word. And that wasn't, and that experience, not only did I realize the power of integrity, but I realized the power of partnership, and I realized that success in business does not happen without your suppliers and without your partners and your other stakeholders. For me, if Louis had not done that, I'd been out of business, right? I would have been over in a world of hurt. And business success is achieved not just through your own efforts, but the efforts of your partnerships with your suppliers in this particular case. Again, a lesson I learned and brought forward as we created the core values of Whole Foods. We created the value just for the suppliers as a very important stakeholder. And the third and final story I want to tell you from this chapter of my life, my story was called Mountain Marketplace. One I will never forget as long as I live. And so I was driving to the terminal every day, and I was exhausted. I would get up, I would drive all night. My truck was too small to go through the scales, so I had to go around the scales, which cost me an extra hour. And anyways, one of my cashiers, Laura Albert, said to me, gosh, you look pretty tired. Maybe if you, my husband Hank just got laid off, maybe you could give him some work and he could help drive the truck and you could sleep a little bit going down to get the produce. Well, let's talk. So Hank and I talked. We arranged we would try it. We would meet the next Thursday at 9 p.m. at the back of the store, and that we would go down to get the produce together, and we'd see how it worked out. So I'll never forget to this day that I'm sharing with you now. At 9 o'clock that night, the door opens and Hank Albert walks in. He's got a lunch pail. He's got a new Carhartt jacket. He's got a thermos of coffee, and he's got a look on his face that told me two things in 10 seconds. Number one is the value of dignity of work for an individual, what it means to have a meaningful place in the world, the dignity of work, the ability to contribute their skills and abilities to the building of any sort of business or any sort of team. Never forget that. And number two was my responsibility. I was a young man. I had a payroll of 12 or 14 like some of you do, and I was just scrapping to put it all together from the ground up, and I'll never, in my responsibility, I said, oh my goodness, I am responsible for this person and for their livelihood, and that means a lot. And so again, those two lessons about what it means to have team members, what it means to have a team, what it means to be responsible for that, it woke me up very early in my life, in my early 20s, to the responsibilities of having a business and what that actually meant. So I share those with you because as I come later and talk about values in business, and we're here to talk about honoring people that are demonstrating value in their business and values in their life. These are stories were the ones that really shaped me as a leader. I never forgot these things. I never forgot these experiences as a young man. And they really guided me as we led and built Whole Foods, which, as you know, became a very large company. In the end, whether you're large or whether you're small, whether you're nonprofit or for-profit, it doesn't really matter. Either you have the values and you use them, and you walk them, and you demonstrate them, and you live them, or you don't. It's pretty simple. And mostly is when times get tough, do you lean on them or do you run away from them? Those are the sort of questions, and I think the winners today are obviously those, and listening to their speeches on the film, they're obviously walking in those values as a good example for all of us. I think we're at an interesting time to talk about this and to have this lunch today because we're at a time when people are talking about business and capitalism in a way they never have. Right? After World War II, it seems to me that everybody understood coming back from the war, at least this was my dad's experience, that corporations, you went to work there, they stepped up, they provided jobs, they provided a lifetime of security, they provided that sort of care in their communities. We have many company towns, Hershey's being an example. This was a sort of the norm in the late 40s and the 50s and in the 60s until the sort of revolution started. But we then had a period of time where, starting with Milton Friedman, who was a friend of John and mine, by the way, and who we had dinner with many times arguing about this issue, advocated for what's called shareholder primacy, which is to say that the purpose of business is to make money. The purpose of business is to serve your shareholders. That is the single purpose of business. And what's happened now in this time that we're in right now is that, and by the way, this history of what is business for goes back a long way. I mean, Aristotle, the Greek philosopher many years ago, he had a problem with for-profit businesses because he felt they weren't going to serve the community in which they were part. He raised those sorts of questions from an ethical standpoint. In ancient Turkey, Ephesus, which is a town which is on the Turkish coast, if you go there, you see the Agora, A-G-O-R-A, which is a wonderful wood, which means marketplace. And when you came up off the sea to the town of Agora, the first place you came up to the town, the first place you came is to the Agora, which is the business marketplace, which told me that in those communities, they saw business and commerce at the very heart and pulse of their community. So you had these tensions even early on in historical times, between what is business? Is it the heart and beat of the community, or is it this thing that's going to challenge and siphon off the profits and not support the community? But this conversation's happening today, and if you just have to read the newspapers or watch the TV every day to hear, you see what's going on now. Big tech companies, which were our saviors 10 years ago or 5 years ago, are now at the center of debate as to whether they're good or not good. And the government's looking at how we rein it in or regulate it, because their behavior has been very concerning in terms of data, in terms of their care for the community, their contribution to the community. And so what happened was you have many, many examples of, in the political campaign that's going on right now, where you have some candidates to the far left saying, we need to change the whole thing, man. We got to change this up. We've got to completely redo the structure of how this is, because capitalism is not working for most people or for many people. And then you have folks on the other side of the political spectrum saying, this is going to destroy the country, it's socialism. What is the truth? I'm sure that there's all sorts of opinions in this room, but what's clear is the nature of business, and is what is business about, and what it's here to do, and is it good or bad, is capital, that's on the table right now in the political discourse and the discourse of this country. Why? Because a lot of this is not working for many Americans. There's many Americans who are, there's Americans that have no more than $400 and are really at risk in terms of their families and their communities. So this, what happened was the Business Roundtable group, led by Jamie Dimon, who's actually a friend of mine, but the chair of JP Morgan, it includes almost 200 of the top CEOs in America, started with a question around what is the purpose of business. In fact, I brought this up here. It made the cover of The Economist here in the last 2 weeks. It says, what are companies for? What are companies for? And so Alex asked the question. He runs Johnson & Johnson. People are asking fundamental questions about how well capitalism serves society. In other words, what is the purpose of business? Why is business here? Is business good or not good? This is essentially the question. By the way, a week after they released their report, he got hit with the judgment against for opioids on Johnson & Johnson for about $500 million. So he was right in the crosshairs right away. But this question about, and this was sort of underscored by the fact that they asked young people in 2016, Harvard University did, followed in 2018 by the Gallup poll, that said over half of American youth do not believe in capitalism, do not believe, and by extension in business, don't believe in it. In fact, a third think socialism is a better way to go. However you define the terms, this is a big piece of news that half of our young folks don't think that business and capitalism is a positive way to go. That's really concerning to me as someone who does consider myself to be a conscious capitalism, a responsible business person, concerning to think that we would be moving away from thinking about the role business can play in society. And so what we had was the release of the Business Roundtable statement, which is around the purpose of business, and which gets a lot to the themes that we're talking about here that you're honoring at the lunch today, which is to say that what the Business Roundtable said 3 or 4 weeks ago was that the purpose of business is no longer just to serve shareholders. The purpose of business is to serve the needs and the interest of all the stakeholders, team members, communities, the environment, and so forth. And you can look at the whole statement online. It's about 300 words. And by the way, they don't mention the word shareholder until word 250. So it's a significant step forward, even if it is to some extent, all these companies will have to live out this statement in their own particular way. 190 of the top CEOs in America signed this statement saying that the purpose of business is now a wider sense of responsibility in the world, which I think is tremendous and long past due. I think if you want to trace the roots of this back, we talked about the role that companies played coming out of World War II, and then we talked about Milton Friedman, the economist at the University of Chicago, making the case that really the only purpose for business was to make money for its shareholders, and how that has really been the dominant philosophy of business to this day. But in 2008, Bill Gates gave a talk at one of the World Economic Forum calling for what he called creative capitalism, where he called on businesses to be, he called on the power of self-interest, which is, folks have their self-interest to build their business and take care of their families, to use that in a more imaginative way. And he suggested that, and I'll show you the quote later on in the talk, that the business might have a new twin mission, which is one, to not only make the profits, but B, to participate more broadly and more inclusively in society. So that's really what kind of got things started, but we're at this place now this summer where the Business Roundtable, which is very, very prominent CEOs, issuing this statement saying that the purpose of business is now for business to look after all of its stakeholders. This is, make no mistake about this, is a very, very big deal. And again, each of these companies will have to do it in their own way, and it isn't binding in any way, shape, or form for them to say that the very purpose of a business is to serve a broader set of responsibilities is exciting for me, because this is a philosophy we tried to start Whole Foods with and continued in the years that we operated. And so Jamie said it well, the sum total of this report is an acknowledgement that business can do more to help the average American. We know we're living in a time of increased disparity of results for people in our country, that there are those that have. Increasingly, the criticism, the business works for those that have it and doesn't work so well for those that don't. Obviously, we saw the Heartland Services. I assume that he's, I forget your name, I'm sorry, but you're serving those folks who don't, things are not going their way and they need some help. And surely part of any sort of society that we want to create is going to be one that's more inclusive and more supportive and more caring of all of our citizens and not just some. I'm sure that's the case. I'm sure everybody wants that in some way, shape, or form. So it's interesting also recently that you saw the situation with Walmart. Now, I happen to know Doug McMillon, the CEO, 52-year-old CEO of Walmart. You saw what happened in El Paso, Texas, where he lost some of his team members and some of his customers and the community. And I thought that the way Doug handled that says a lot about the way business faces a range of situations every day. When we get up in the morning to run our companies, we're facing a wide range of situations. We never know exactly what's going to come. Right? Well, what happened for Doug, he was driving home with his wife. He got a call. There's a situation in El Paso. You all know the news, what happened. And so here's somebody that running a company that's over $500 billion in an economy that's $17 trillion. The number one player in American business by far. Obviously, his words are going to matter. And what did he do? He spent the first day and a half, he went to El Paso, he hugged people, he let them cry, he told them he cared. He said, and people said, well, what about the guns? He said, there'll be time enough for me we're going to think about that, but right now we're going to take care of our team members, we're going to take care of the community. They shut the store down, they're going to rebuild it, repaint it, etc. But he did it exactly right. He met them with heart. And he met them with heart and care and compassion, just the sort of qualities you'd want to see in a leader today. I thought his response was genuine and heartfelt with the people of El Paso, who obviously suffered a huge loss. You may have noticed that last week he came back out after saying that he would be thoughtful and deliberate about it, and he made a measured move, which is to say he discontinued some forms of ammunition and some guns. Not all guns, but a measured step that represented a step forward for him to say, if I'm thinking about Walmart's success and its future success for all the stakeholders, there's something I need to do here, and I need to take some sort of a concrete step with respect to this situation. He didn't go all the way over here, and he didn't, rail on anything politically. And people said to me, well, why didn't Doug just go and use his resources to lobby in Washington? Well, he chose not to do that. He chose to do something with his existing business and act with integrity as he saw it, and made the decision, a decision to do what he did. So I thought there's an example for you of a CEO who's sitting there trying to decide, presented with a set of facts. None of us get up in the morning and know exactly what the facts are going to be. As CEO of Whole Foods, sitting there wondering what's going to happen. These lights never went off. Whole Foods was open somewhere 24 hours a day. I never knew what was going to happen. And when it did happen, it usually happened Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning. It didn't happen Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, I promise you that. So there you are as CEO, you're thinking about what do I do? I'm the leader of this company. He's the largest employer in America. How am I going to handle the situation? How am I thinking about my responsibilities as a CEO into this company? Well, you see his result. the 2 steps he took, and the order in which he took them, and the care with which he took them, I think is a good example of a leader who recognizes they have responsibility. And by the way, their stock did not go down as a result of him taking that decision. I think a second thing that's interesting, obviously, depending on your view on climate change, if you ask the farmers, they certainly know it's real, but call it what you will, we're seeing a rise in temperatures, and we're seeing a rise in the carbon dioxide levels in the universe. I have a farmer friend that farms 100,000 acres in Bakersfield, California, the largest organic vegetable farmer for Whole Foods, who tells me now he's got 16 days over 100 degrees in Bakersfield, and at 100 degrees the plants shut down. And he has to keep his crops in the field for another 2 weeks in order to get the full production out of his farm. So it's a real factor economically. So a lot of folks are saying, well, if you're in business or if you're lending money to a business, like Christine Lagarde, who's now the chair of the European Central Bank, has said, all right, I'm going to go back and as a result of being responsible, look at my exposure to these sorts of risks in the different businesses to which we've lent. This is broadly called in the world today ESG, environmental, social, governance issues, but there are a new suite of risks that are out there for businesses that are also tied to the responsibilities, again, of a CEO or a leader, an executive director, to think about how do I think about my responsibilities to the environment in light of the new information? How do I think about my exposure to diversity in my workforce or to the training my workers will need in light of the changing technology? How do I think about the fact that the generations are changing? At Whole Foods, we had 105,000 team members, and now we're 55% are millennials at Whole Foods. So we've crossed over in the generational change, which means that we have responsibilities to think differently about. They want feedback differently. They want job opportunities differently. They want to be thought, and the older workers want to understand how are you going to help them think about the changing economy, the changing technologies, and how they'll see a way forward for them and their family. So other companies, have been great examples. This is Howard, of course, my friend at Starbucks, no longer there. But Howard started a great program with Arizona State University where his baristas could go back to school and Starbucks would pay for it. And it's close to 10,000 baristas now are going back to school to get their degree through their employment at Starbucks. Mark Benioff that runs Salesforce, many of you know about his 1-1-1 program where he gives 1% of his stock away every year, but essentially there was almost 4 million community volunteer hours from Salesforce last year. He takes his responsibilities being a participant in the communities that he serves all over the globe very seriously. It's built into his charter as a company, into the DNA of Salesforce, we accept our responsibility to be part of the communities, to serve a broader role in society, to take, and I just think these examples are all around. I've just picked a few for you, but right here in Omaha, I'm sure there's the ones that got the award today. You see that they're thinking about more than just their own business. They're thinking about how they situate in Omaha and the greater community. We doing okay? All right. She's the boss right here. She's watching me closely. Some of you may have heard of the investor Paul Tudor Jones, very famous, has now started something called Just Capital, which I happen to serve as a senior advisor to. And essentially what he's doing here is he's asking Americans, how do you think a just business behaves? Just is not too far from integrity, right? Just is a cousin to integrity, surely. We're talking about values in business. And so he's asking Americans, tell us how you think a business should behave, and now he's ranking and issuing a top 100 just companies and all the metrics associated with each of the stakeholders. And by the way, the number one thing Americans said and spoke, and it's a 26% weighting in the ranking, is how a company takes care of its workers or takes care of its team members. That is the number one ranking that Americans in general across the board, and this is many, many thousands of Americans say, is the responsibility of business. Now, that's not in Milton Friedman's statement, but I will tell you the philosophy of Southwest Airlines, the philosophy at Herb Kelleher, the philosophy of Whole Foods Market. We take care of our team members, they will take care of our customers. That's leadership's responsibility. So we're starting to see these things surface. This is at the very heart of Whole Foods. I share them with you just because it's another view of capitalism, and we call it conscious capitalism. Essentially, this is the way we started, this is the way we believe, and this is the way we try to run our company all these years. And there's 4 basic tenets to it. Number one, why does a company exist? It exists for a greater purpose than making money. It exists for a purpose of making some sort of an impact in the world. The purpose question is the why question. Why does your organization exist? What are you here to do? I can tell you as a young man, I knew I wanted to make an impact on the world. I didn't exactly know what form it would take. I found my way to natural foods, and then you know the rest of the story. But the purpose is this great principle of having a North Star that guides you and that leads you and that inspires you and inspires your team members around what you're here to do in the world. The second principle is stakeholder integration. We've just talked about that. This notion that you're running a business to serve multiple stakeholders. And when you make decisions, you're thinking about the legitimate interests of all of your stakeholders as you make those decisions. A silly example for you. Folks wanted us to put farmers markets in our parking lot on Saturday. Why would we do that? We'd lose our own produce sales. Okay, from the shareholder perspective, yes. From the stakeholder perspective, the communities love it. The suppliers love it because they get a chance to connect directly with the customers, right? And our team members thought it was fantastic. So on the scoreboard, from a stakeholder perspective, it's a good decision, and so we did it, right? So because in the end, you believe that if you serve your stakeholders well, you're going to serve your shareholders well. And that's in fact what happened for us for many, many years. Our stock was a good runner until it wasn't. But the third principle is really around leadership. And this idea that if you are not growing yourself as a person or as a leader, it's pretty hard for your organization to grow. If you can't let go so that there can be more room or space for others, it's going to be hard for your company to grow. Are you doing the work on yourself as a leader, as a person? Are you thinking about these things so that, and that's, you know, as we grew the organization to a very large company operating in 44 states and 3 countries, we were $16 billion in sales when we sold to Amazon. That's a lot of people in a lot of places. The only way to do that is to continue to grow and to let go so that the others can step up and take responsibility and grow as individuals. And so we spent a lot of time investing in training in leadership and what it means to lead with integrity and lead with values. You can't assume that people understand that. They'll see your example of how you lead, but you want to help them along the way so that they have that chance to lead from values and make sure that that culture continues throughout your company. And finally, conscious culture. And I define culture as where the people live in a company. Every company has one. You can't take it from the other company. You can borrow ideas, but it has to come directly from your own experience. Culture is what I define as how the team members feel working for you and how the customers feel shopping with you. It's sort of what is their experience being with you in your company, during your services, whatever you're doing in the world. How do they feel doing business with you? How do they feel working for you? That is your culture. And if you haven't done that sort of exercise around what your culture is, it could be fun to go to the whiteboard, get folks and say, well, let's throw the words out that you experience working or being part of this company. Because the philosophy at Whole Foods was that we were going to continue to invest in our culture. As simple cultural practices, here's one for you. At the end of every Whole Foods meeting, we had appreciations. So we could have a very big argument about the growth of the company, how fast we were going to grow, how many stores we were going to build. But at the end, we'd stop and we'd take a minute and finish the meeting with appreciations. So Steve, I appreciate, or Monsignor, I appreciate your prayer today. I asked you of you. I appreciate how humble that was, how thoughtful it was, and how just perfect pitch it was for today's event. So like that. You don't have to do it, but if you want to do it and it's genuine, the gratitude lifts everybody up. And so cultural practices, I don't know you can have awards, recognition. Do you realize what it means to somebody in an organization to be recognized? It's fantastic, right? And so what does it cost you? Nothing. Your time and words. So you can create an event or something. You can have the silly pineapple award, whatever, doesn't really matter. It has to be from your company, but that little bit of recognition goes a long way to stitching a culture together, which as you get bigger is the key to having a successful company. It's having people feel like they're part of something greater than themselves. So again, we translated our values and our points of view into our product standards. We do, I believe, have the highest standards in the supermarket industry. No one comes close, really, in my view. If you understood everything we do to produce our food, it's all on the website, but you can see over the years we worked on building these different standards out, which I think set us apart in the marketplace. That was our first store on the left, by the way. Definitely a hippie store. This I share with you because this is my own particular passion, which is I got worried as we got in the late 90s. I felt like we were very much a white company in a society that was growing ever more diverse. And I was troubled by the fact that I know the power of quality of food, what it can do for your health. And I was looking at inner cities of America where there wasn't the access to fresh, healthy food like we all enjoy every day here. And in fact, when I did the research, there's 6,300 communities in America that don't have access to fresh, healthy food, defined as within 2 miles of a major supermarket, right? So there really are places where they just don't all they have is the fast food choices, right? And the health conditions that come out of that, this, for example, in Detroit, are 10 or 12 years less life expectancy less than right outside the city. And that became a moral problem for me when I thought I had something I could do about it. Now, is Whole Foods the answer to all these things? No, but can Whole Foods do something about this? Can Whole Foods do some part to play in solving one of these big problems that is part of what, is difficult for our country? Yes, I felt we could. So I went to Detroit in 2009 at the invitation of Secretary Vilsack in Agriculture, and then I met some community leaders. I spent 3 years in the city because I didn't want to just drop in. I wanted to build a connection. And I remember somebody mentioned trust in the comments earlier. I sat down across from some community leaders and they said, well, you've got to sign a community benefits agreement. I said, I'm not going to sign a community benefits agreement. If we can't build a trust with one another, we're not going to do this. I mean, we have to be doing something that you want us to do. And so in the end, though, I will tell you, this day, June 5th, 2013, my proudest day as a grocer, when after 3+ years or 4+ years of working with the community, we opened the store in the inner city of Detroit, which was the first supermarket in Detroit since the 50s in white flight. And I'm proud to say it's now celebrated its 6th anniversary. We put 250 people to work. We put 50 new suppliers to work in the store. And I think we were key to, and I think if you talk to folks in Detroit, you will find, along with Shinola Watch, they opened a factory there to employ the auto workers. We were 2 of the folks that really helped to improve the Detroit economy, which is now on its way back. But this day brought tears to my eyes, and realizing that, when you set out to do something, when you set out to believe that you can make some sort of an impact, even if you don't exactly know how it's going to happen or how it's going to go, you can do it. You can do it. You just have to believe it. I mean, I went to the interview with the Detroit Free Press when we announced this store, and the first question I got is, what are you going to do when you have to close the store? Well, this is the cynicism that's in the world. It's all around in the world. It's all around the world that we can't do these things. But the truth is, and my life experience tells me, you can do exactly what you want to do. If you can see it, you can do it. If you can imagine it, you can do it. Anything less is a failure of imagination or a failure of your courage to take it on. So you want a better world, then do something about it. And start with your individual business or your organization, like you have done, the award winners have done today, and make those sorts of contributions. It is possible to do that, and that has been my life experience. And so we also set up 3 foundations, this just being in terms of saying, if you have values like integrity, you have to take those values and put them into action. You carry them, but you've got to act on them to have them their full power. And for us, again, 3 foundations. We started Whole Planet to service the 80 countries where we buy product around the world. This we do through microloans, about 99% to women because the men tend to blow the money. But and the 2 requirements, they have to open up a checking account and they have to start an income-producing business. Whole Kids Foundation started 9 years ago when Michelle Obama called and asked us to help her with her effort to build a healthier America. This foundation builds salad bars, gardens, and helps teachers with healthy eating education. In 2 more weeks, the entire curriculum will be available to every teacher online through wholekidsfoundation.org. And my personal favorite, of course, Whole Cities, which was developed after Detroit to work on education and cultural access in inner city America. And so now we empower our team members who live in the different parts to pick the community organizations they feel are going to help with food access, which is a tremendous disparity in this country. Those are the foundations that we created and are all nonprofit. I still chair 2 of those to the day as I stand here in front of you. So these are our values, come with each of our stakeholders. Again, they're not your values, they're our values at Whole Foods, but I show them just to share with you because I go back to Jerry Irish and say that, have you asked yourself the question what your values are? I'm sure the Monsignor has done that, and I'm sure he's thought about that, and he's probably could come up here and talk about it. But it's a great question to ask because it gets to the deeper purpose of why you're here on earth as a human being. And I will tell you, at least from my own life experience, until you get on that level and until you ask yourself these sorts of questions, until you pursue these sorts of things, you won't find your greatest life fulfillment. You will find your greatest life fulfillment in taking these values, identifying them, and really trying to live them. There's so much, and even if it's imperfect, the pursuit of those, the expression of those is so rewarding in so many ways. And so One of my favorite books on ethics, because I know you have the Business Ethics Institute over at Creighton, and I didn't make the breakfast this morning, but I was pleased to hear about that group. I don't know if anybody's here from that institute. This is one of my favorite books about ethics and business, and I'm not going to read you the quote, you can read it yourself, but it does talk about how business success, ultimately these values of integrity and ethics are at the core of successful business and at the core of a successful society. And again, we have great examples in the honorees today of those who are taking these things. I love the way each of them spoke. You notice it wasn't cookie cutter, their little speech. Every one of them said something directly from their own experience. I was very impressed. And so my concluding thoughts, because I was asked to provide 3 takeaways, and instead I'm going to give you 5. So 2-for-1 deal, or retail special here. Here are my 5. The ask was for me to give you some things that you could take and act upon in your own endeavors. And number 1, and this is probably no surprise at this point in the talk, but have a strong North Star. Do the work. Figure out what it is you're here to do. Why do you exist? What is your reason for being? What are the values that guide you? You remember my example from Jerry Irish where he asked me to say, who am I and in what or whom do I find guidance for the conduct of my life? That's a serious question, right? What are your values? Is integrity one of them? Does that matter to you? Is compassion one? Does that matter to you? I mean, there's no right answer. There's just your answer to this. And again, today's business world, you have to have a strategy, okay? The business is hyper competitive. It's moving faster than ever. If you don't have a clear thought as to how you're going to win your share in the marketplace, you're going to fail. So you've got to do the work at a high level around where you think your particular opportunity in your zone is. We were talking, if I could use my friends here in the roofing business, we were talking kind of about his future, because he's got his kids in the business and they're thinking about where they go from here. And this just is the type of situation where you have got to really think it through and figure out, where your strategies are. So you got to do the work around this, and sometimes you have to get help to help you do that. Second of all is you've got to continue to differentiate yourself, all right? Because what we have in the world with Amazon, et cetera, is a race to the bottom. We're commodifying a lot of things. They're cheap, but this is why we have no inflation in the economy. But there's just so many choices. It's all moving so fast. Unless you intend to be the next Amazon or Walmart, your choice is to make sure that people understand what is different about you and what you're doing and what the service you're providing, the product you're selling, what is different about it than what else is out there. It's very hard to stand out today. There's a lot of noise out there, and for you to stand up and be recognized and noticed, you've got to be able to differentiate yourself clearly. What is different about your product or service than everybody else in the marketplace? Number 3, and I learned this from Amazon, customer obsession. You really got to focus in on your customer and figure out who they are and what they want. I was with John Chambers yesterday. John ran Cisco for many, many years, and he said one of the secrets to his success, and Cisco sold their routers systems all over the world, was he spent the time listening to the customer, really trying to understand how they were seeing their business, figuring out where he could provide a solution technologically to their situation. And I thought Whole Foods was pretty good at this, but I think Amazon's really good at it in terms of focusing on the customer and getting the data to understand what, and then being able to serve them. I thought price was probably their number 1 thing, but getting to know them a little bit, it's much more about customer convenience. They rank convenience above price. They figure if they can get it to you fast, you're not going to notice another dime or 20 cents or whatever. So, funny story about that with Amazon is that, to the next one. 4th is invest in your team members. I don't know how to say this strongly enough, but if you're running a business, it's all about your people. It's all about how you think about your people, care about your people, invest in your people. It's all about taking care of your team members. That responsibility, where it comes from in me because of Hank Elber's story, but I have learned from leading a very large organization of over 100,000 team members that this is more important than ever in business today. Go back, whether it's the Business Roundtable, if you read their statement of purpose, recognizing how important team members are to the successful outcome of a business. Go listen to Herb Kelleher talk about investing in team members in Southwest Airlines. Listen to me about Whole Foods. If you respect Whole Foods, about the job of leadership is to take care of our team members, and they will take care of our customers. Build a culture of connection and care for your team members. Invest in your team members. My greatest learning as a leader after 40 years of leadership is this, and my last name is Robb, R-O-B-B, and I'm a type A leader. And the feedback early on was, well, you rob people of their power. Oh, whoa, I got to think about that. But I have learned, I used to walk a grocery store. I could walk a grocery store in my sleep and see what's going on and feel it and see it. But I realized as the years went on, my job was to walk that store and see the people. And I would now spend 3 hours in the store seeing how people were doing, how were they feeling about the company, where we were doing, how did they feel about the culture. That's where I spent all my time, and realizing that building that culture of people feeling like they're part of something greater than themselves, that they're going to be recognized and seen, that they're going to have opportunities, that the magic of leadership is being able to look at a person and say to yourself, every single person that's here has got magic inside of them. And my job as a leader is to help create a situation where that magic can come out and contribute to the success of the company. Because I stopped ordering the broccoli a long time ago at Whole Foods. But my job was to hold a space and create a space where those team members could flourish and shine. And there's nothing as a leader that gets you more excited than seeing a team member shine. And the greatest memories of my as being a leader are not going to Wall Street, not seeing our stock shine, but seeing those team members come back years later and see them take on that responsibility and just lift the company up. And so finally, be a tech and data company. You simply can't succeed in business today unless you have the platforms in some way. You can get them from somebody else. You can rent them, you can borrow them, you can partner your way to them, but if you don't have the basic technology to function digitally as well as physically, and the data ability to know who your customer is, you're going to be at a very competitive disadvantage in today's world. The customer today has made it very clear they expect to be met and served both digitally and physically. They like both. I was talking to Elizabeth, right, from the Furniture Mart. Where are you, Elizabeth? Somewhere. Where are you? There you are. Yeah, we chatted about this earlier, that the Furniture Mart is going through that exercise now, bringing a lot of technology to their efforts, because the customer today expects and wants to be served all those sorts of ways. You've got to give yourself the capabilities to do that. Maybe Better Business Bureau's got some recommendations on that, but clearly you have to do this today. You have the ability to capture the data and be able to understand who your customer is and how you can serve them. What's happening with Amazon now is they're blending the online with the physical, and they now have a kind of a 360 view of how you shop for food, which of course will then turn around and be able to sell you other things that now that they know that how you think about your food basket. So in conclusion, two last quotes. One is what I promised you from Bill Gates, where this was in 2008 when he gave this speech, kind of a harbinger of the discussion of business and capitalism that we're having in our society right now, is kind of calling on people to, and he's kind of backed it up with the Gates Foundation, I would say, but let's make profits, but let's also improve lives for those who don't fully benefit from market forces. Let's recognize that this is an unequal outcome, and it wasn't set up to be an equal outcome. It's set up to reward exceptional individualism and entrepreneurs, but it's also recognized that we're part of a larger community, and we have a responsibility to be part of that community, to participate. And that's what I think he was saying. Let's recognize that there's more we can do to support those who don't fully benefit from the market forces. And finally, my hero, Albert Schweitzer, some of you may not know him, but he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1963. And the reason he did is because he was a world-class theologian and philosopher, religious ethics. He also played the organ, Bach organ. Nobody's played it better before or since. But at the age of 30, he checked it all and went back to medical school, got his degree, and went to Africa for the rest of his life, where he operated a hospital for the poor in Lambaréné. And he used his skills to support the hospital, but that's what he spent the rest of his life doing. He's also a tremendous writer. And as a young man looking at that example, I said to myself, man, that is really impressive. Here's somebody who believes it and then is going to put their life on the line for it. And it had a tremendous impact on me, saying, if you believe something, then what are you going to do with it, or what are you going to do about it? And his quote, which is one I carry with me always, is, "The future of humanity depends on each and every one of us in every moment that we find ourselves displaying true humanity to one another." And what he means by that is that in every conversation, in every situation, whether it's TSA, pre, or whatever, at the airport, we have an opportunity to step in and lift somebody up or take them down. It's the same thing if you're a leader in your business, the same thing if you're running a business. You have an opportunity each and every moment to lift people up, to lift the community up, to lift your team members up, to lift your customers up, or to take them down. And we've all seen that. And no one's perfect. No one gets it right all the time. But that is the greatest potential, I think, for bringing your values to bear in your work every day in business and in your community. So I would dare to say, too, that the quality of Beyond Humanity is the quality of love. Somehow we've gotten love over here when love really should be part of what business is. And I'm not talking about gutter love. I'm talking about the love of the heart, the genuine love for fellow human beings and for their potential. And I think what Schweitzer meant was, will we take our values, will we take the time to identify our values, will we take the time to have the integrity to practice those values, and we use them in every moment, whether it's in our personal lives, our civic lives, or our business lives, to bring more love and humanity to the world. So with that, I'll say thank you very much for having me here today. I appreciate it.